want to talk to you briefly today about a concept that the Lord just was dealing with me with actually last Sunday morning when I woke up. You know, the ancient rabbis call this stringing pearls, to where you take scriptures and you string them all together and you get a common theme. But it's about the other side. How often that come up in the gospel accounts of the other side. Well, it starts, Jesus' would-be disciples were out fishing, didn't catch anything. Jesus asked to use their boat, and he preached a message with their boat, because water's a natural amplifier, so he put the boat out a little ways and so the people could hear him better. And then Jesus tells Peter to take his boat out and cast the net on the other side for a haul of fish. And reluctantly, Peter obeys him, but when he does, he gets a haul of fish. And then, whenever he tells Peter to follow him, he said, "Follow me and I will make you fishers of men." So that began a type scene. It set a precedent. Fast forward a little while longer, Jesus tells his disciples, "Let us go to the other side." Now, that doesn't mean much to us, but the disciples knew what he meant. When he said the other side, he meant Decapolis. Decapolis was, well, let me back up a little further. Whenever Israel was conquered by Babylon, whenever they all came back, not part of the land was taken still by Gentiles. Well, Decapolis was a Greco-Roman city, and they worshipped the emperor. So it was so wicked that Jewish people made it forbidden to even speak the name of the city of Decapolis. And that's where Jesus was going. And a little further backstory, Julius Caesar, he wanted to suspend the democracy of Rome and make himself the emperor. Well, those around him saw it as a dangerous idea, so they assassinated him. Well, shortly after his assassination, several people saw a comet in the sky, and they believed that that was Julius Caesar ascending into heaven. And so his successor, Octavian, which became Caesar Augustus, that made him the son of God. So Julius Caesar was God, and he was the son of God, according to them. And it set up an emperor cult. But there was a civil war between Brutus and Cassius, as ones that assassinated Julius Caesar, to stop Caesar Augustus from taking over as emperor. Well, Caesar Augustus won the battle, and Brutus and Cassius was killed, and all of their followers. But Decapolis was a monument to that emperor cult. Also, they were most likely worship Zeus as well. That's why there was pigs there. We'll get to that in a minute. Most of you know the story. So the Emperor Caesar was considered Lord and God. And actually, this wasn't even new to this time. The Pharaohs that God had to deliver his people from initially, Pharaoh set himself up as God. And he even took credit for the weather and the sun rising and everything. The emperor took credit for. And and that's why you see a lot of times that over the centuries there would be different pharaohs, because the people would uprise, because you know, when you promise to make the weather good, you really can't make good on that campaign promise. So there was revolts. And you know, we say that, we hear that and we think, oh man, that's just so dumb. You know, I'm so thankful that we're more enlightened citizens than that. Well, we have political candidates today that blame sitting presidents for disease contagions. They blame sitting presidents for natural disasters. So we're really not that far removed from it either. And the problem with that is just like the pharaohs of old, all these political candidates that promise to change the weather and change all these other things, when they don't make good at it, they're going to be ousted out on their ear, just like the pharaohs. But that's That's a side point. But that just gives you the backstory. We don't understand a lot of times when we're reading the Gospels, all these backstories behind these places. So Jesus is saying, let us go to the other side. So they're in the boat, headed to that mission, headed to the other side. And then we see an inverted Jonah story. Jonah, most of you know the story. If you've been in any Sunday school class, Jonah was told to go to Nineveh and tell them in 40 days, 40 nights, Nineveh was going to fall. Well, let me insert a little anecdote here. They did an experiment where they broke two different groups of people up, and they showed them different faces of people, and they asked them to identify their mood based upon their faith or their face. Are they angry? Are they sad? Are they whatever? The first group did very well. The second group didn't do so well. Now, I'm not preaching against this. This is just an illustration, so don't get mad at me. But the reason the second group didn't do very well, the second group had Botox injections in their face. And what they noticed, whenever they showed the people the different faces, they would mimic it with their faces, and it was key for them to identify what that other person was feeling. So the point of that is, we have to feel the weight of what the people in these biblical accounts were experiencing. You know, we make Jonah about he don't want to go talk to Nineveh because they'll repent and his track record as a prophet will get ruined, and the people will send out a newsletter on him. But that's not what it's about. You got to understand who Nineveh was. Nineveh was the capital of Assyria. Assyrians invented terrorism. You know, there's a lot of barbaric things done in times of war, but usually they would just conquer their enemies and overtake them. Assyria invented terrorism. In other words, psychological warfare. They would skin people alive and drape their skin over, just barbaric, brutal things to instill fear in their enemies. They were very brutal people. And you know, and we got to understand that. Understand Jonah's reluctance to go to those people. No doubt, friends and loved ones were murdered by the Assyrians. So that's why he was reluctant to go to them. Now, that doesn't excuse him of his disobedience, but we can't just set over him in judgment. What if God told you, I want you to go to ISIS and minister to them? I want you to go to Al-Qaeda and minister to them and go tell them to repent so I can forgive them and make their lives hunky-dory after they've done all these atrocities. So, but Jonah told to go to Nineveh, tell them to repent. He's on a boat. He gets on a boat to Tarshish, which was the furthest known city that they knew about, furthest away geographically, which is modern day Spain. So he gets on a ship, goes the opposite way, and there arises a storm, and he's asleep in the bottom of a ship. They ask Jonah what's going on, and he tells them the story that he's running from God. And Jonah tells them to throw him in the sea, and that's when the whale swallows him and spits him out at Nineveh, and he goes and reluctantly preaches to Nineveh. You know, and you got to understand the symbol, the imagery in that. The whale that we call it a whale. The Bible don't say whale. This chaos creature. Because he was in disobedience, he's swallowed up by this chaos creature, and only when he repents does his life go back from ascend from chaos back to shalom, back to peace. But anyway, well, in the gospel account, Jesus is going to the other side. He's going towards the mission, and he's asleep in the bottom of the boat. And then a storm arises, and the disciples wake him up. In the Greek, it's a little blind in English translations. the closest we have to it is some like Mediterranean languages, where the answer is built into the question. You do care about us, yes. It wasn't as a stark as an accusation as it looks like in the Gospels, but we don't have an English equivalent for the translations of translators. So it was actually a soft accusation, but Jesus still rebukes them for the unbelief. But they wake him up. He rebukes the storm but he's going towards the mission where Jonah was going away from the mission. He was asleep in the boat during the storm, but rather than throwing him in, that calms the storm, he just calms the storm by speaking a word. And fast forward again, they get to the other side being the Decapolis. Anyway, Jesus gets out of the boat, and there's a demon-possessed man. Matthew says there's 2 demon-possessed men meets him. Now, what you got to understand about this man, he is an outcast in both cultures. The Greco-Roman culture, they celebrated human achievement, and it says this guy lived in the tombs. He was cutting himself with stones. It says he didn't wear any clothes and just run around like a madman because he was demon possessed. So he would have been an outcast in that culture, and also he would also be an outcast in Jewish culture. And there was reasons for all these things, but tombs were considered unclean. He had open festering sores. You were supposed to avoid because you were considered unclean. He was bleeding and running around naked, which was suggestive and would not be kosher. I won't go through the whole interaction between Jesus and the demoniac, but Jesus, in the Greek, it says that Jesus was saying, "Come out, come out, come out." So this was a protracted conversation. And then the demoniac was saying, "We know who you are, the Son of God, the Most High," and this big long litany of things. And Jesus finally says, "What is your name?" And the demon, speaking through the man, says, "I am Legion, for we are many." Well, in this civil war that put the Emperor Octavian, who later became Caesar Augustus, the group that fought to put Caesar Augustus into power was called the Legion. That's what they call themselves. So we're seeing what happened in the natural was mirrored after the spirit realm. And we see that a lot. That's a reoccurring theme in the Bible. A lot of the things going on in this natural scene realm is mirrored by things that were happening in the realm of the spirit. And then Jesus said, no, tells him to come out, and the demon says, "Send us into the pigs." That Roman legion had a mascot, and that mascot was a boar or a pig. So once again, you see this just depth of imagery that's going on here. So Jesus, you know the story, Jesus sends the demons into the pigs, and the pigs run down the embankment and into the sea and are drowned. So here's a guy, and Jesus delivers him of the demonic oppression. The man wants to follow him, but Jesus says, "No, stay behind." And both Jairus' daughter, he comes back, Jairus' daughter is raised up from the dead, and the woman with the issue of blood were both healed based on the testimony of this man. So this one man set free sparked a revival in that region, because a great many people met with them when they came back to Decapolis. But the point I want you to see is Jesus went to the other side. Jesus went to places where nobody else wanted to go, and ministered to a person that nobody else wanted to touch, nobody else wanted to fool with, because he was an outcast in every culture of his day. Then fast forward again to the end of Jesus' ministry. He's crucified, raised from the dead, But Peter had denied him, so he'd about given up on this whole call of God business. So he says, I'm going fishing. Well, while he's out in the boat fishing, then the other disciples went with him. He hears Jesus from the shore say, cast your net on the other side. So once again, he gets the same command that he was commissioned. And this begins a process of Peter's restoration to that place of ministry. And I won't go into all that because that's not. But it says in the gospel account of John, you got to understand about John, a little bit more backstory. I know there's backstories within backstories here, but John, he was the pastor of Asia at the churches of Asia Minor. He wrote letters to the church in Revelation. He writes letters to the churches in Asia Minor. So, but whenever they said they cast the net on the other side at Jesus' command, he pulled up a net full of fish. And John's account says there was 153 fish in the net. Well, there was a guy from Asia Minor, which all of John's hearers would know about, named Onesiphorus, and he was a zoologist, and he traveled the known world at the time, and according to his reckoning, there was 153 different species of fish. So, I believe what John is signaling in that is every type of fish, the net's big enough, if we will just go after them, the gospel is good for every people group. Every different people group in the world, the gospel's good enough for. And the gospel is the answer for. But the problem is the more our culture becomes more and more polarized and divided, it's getting to the point where we can't even have a discussion with somebody on the other side. It's funny, even as far removed from biblical culture as we get, we still use these same metaphors. People on the other side of the issue. But Jesus engaged the people on the other side of the issue. And the problems we have is the same ones that ancient Israel had. That striking that balance between come out and be separate to where the world is no longer affecting us, and we're not adapting the sin and the fallen ways of the world, and yet engaging our world and going and being salt and light and going into our world and proclaiming the gospel to those that are on the other side, to those that are outcast, to those that are marginalized, and bringing them back into the Father's house. And that's our mission, to go to the other side and bring them in. Thanks for watching. God bless.